What's up, guys? A 1-0 sweep of the board yesterday. Although some of my leans, I think, got there. I gave out my thoughts on a couple of those games that Saab asked about. Saab, a nice call on the Kansas City Royals, of course. It kind of angered me a little bit that I wound up being right on the totals on those games that I commented on. I said I thought the over was the strongest way to play the Brewers Pirates game yesterday and the under in the Toronto Kansas City game. Both of those were correct. But whatever the case may be, and I was right on all three sides in the NBA. But focus down on just that one game, Orlando Magic. It was a winner, so I do like that. I'll take it. It was a strong winner as well, an easy winner, just wire to wire. No sweat there. So those are the nights you do like to have. Moving on to today, we have 4 NHL playoff games today, and I am going to be on one. Right now I'm on one game in each sport that I think is the strongest in each. I will see if I'm right about it, but these series are all, I believe, in game 3 now, so they're all switching locations. Rangers are up 2-0. They're going to Washington now. They've dropped from -185 to -169. Not a whole lot of travel involved in this one, but 79% of the tickets, 92% of the cash. So cash discrepancy showing on the Rangers. With the Rangers, the number's gone down on them a little bit. Just because it is an 0-2 deficit for Washington at this point, that would kind of be my lean, but I don't think it's that strong. I believe that they have been outplayed in the series. I don't think you're really getting any value if you're trying to play the Rangers and lay a big road price there either, especially up 2-0. But it's not something I want to get involved in. Vancouver and Nashville is the second game on. I'm actually going to be on the last game out of all of them. So Vancouver and Nashville don't have a plan. This has seen a lot of line movement, it looks like, though. Nashville down from -130 to -106 as a home favorite. Now, this is a larger travel spot here, although, of course, both teams having to travel. Vancouver and Nashville having to go back to Nashville now. But I think you got to think that Nashville has a little bit of a stronger home ice advantage than some of these other teams just because there's more of a distance there. 62% of the tickets on them, 80% of the cash on Nashville, even though it looks like the line has dropped quite a bit on them. I believe Vancouver, what was Vancouver at home? I don't even remember how big of a favorite Vancouver was at home. So I'm not sure. Usually you get basically 20 cents is usually home ice, maybe a little bit more in playoffs, though, maybe 30 or so. So if Nashville is basically around like a -100 here, that would kind of indicate that Vancouver should have been a -140 favorite at home, basically. And I don't remember if that's about where they were or not. So it's possible that this line is shortchanging Nashville a little bit for many of those reasons there. But if you buy into the zigzag, of course, it is a situation where Nashville, I believe, won game 2 to even up the series. This is a 1-1 series now. So is it possible that Nashville's going to be in a little bit of a letdown spot coming off of that big win? And Nashville blew a lead in game 1. They could have won both games. Or does that also mean that Vancouver might be like does it mean Vancouver is going to be refocused and come back and play better in this game? I mean, that's also possible. It might. I don't quite have a read on this one because I do think the Nashville home ice is fairly strong. I think it's that Vancouver might even be a little bit overvalued out of these two teams because I don't think that Vancouver is that much better than Nashville. Vancouver, by the way, was -125 at home in the last game where they were at home. So the odds makers are basically telling you these teams are close to even here. And then in this game, based on that line, the line in this game is actually short. Like the line should probably be around like -110, maybe between -110 and 120 for Nashville here. So tough to say because the situation kind of goes against it, but I do think that Nashville is still being undervalued a little bit in the line. Winnipeg and Colorado, that series is also 1-1. I was able to win on game 2 of that one with Colorado. Now that series shifts to Colorado into elevation, which might be a little bit more of an advantage for Colorado there. Colorado's sitting at -165, 74% of the tickets on them, 94% of the cash. And by the way, the zigzag, like one of the main reasons it's a thing, though, is not just because the team that did poorly in the last game tends to be the team that has the adjustments to make and can make those adjustments. But usually it's a situation where if there's value there, it's because the line overreacts to that result. And don't think that that's the case in that Nashville one because Nashville should be too heavy a favorite if that was the case. But I think they're actually too short. In this Colorado one, I think the line is probably just about right. Odds makers in this series, they had Colorado favored on the road. So they continue to tell you that Colorado's just the better team here. And that is the way that I would lean in this one. It's not going to be a play for me. Colorado, they are coming off a win. So it is possible that Winnipeg is going to be the team to make some adjustments here. Having lost the second game, I don't know about that. But odds makers are telling you, again, that Colorado's a better team. And maybe having a little bit of extra home ice because it involves having to go into elevation for Winnipeg here. So that is the way I would look there. And the game I'm actually going to be on is to be on the Edmonton Oilers. I can get them in the minus 120 something range right now. I found minus 128, I think, a little while ago. Looks like this line is moving up, though, on Edmonton from minus 130 to minus 136 as a road favorite. Odds makers continue to tell you in this, well, we know that Edmonton's the better team. They were somewhere around minus 170 or so on their home ice. So this line basically is about right, I would say. Probably should be around minus 130 or so here, given that the home ice may be a little bit stronger in this series than in others because these teams aren't that close to each other geographically. Edmonton looks like they've moved up on the line, and this almost looks like a pros versus Joes situation, which is surprising to see. LA, the Kings, 51% of the tickets on them, but Edmonton, 74% of the cash. So it's weird to see that cash discrepancy there. You'd think that Edmonton, I mean, they have a great offense. They have Connor McDavid. They tend to be the team that the public is going to want to play here. So I don't know if this is just recency because LA won game 2. This is also a 1-1 series now. I don't really know, but I believe Edmonton's the better team. The odds makers are telling you that that's the case. The series shifts back to LA, and it's possible LA might be in a little bit of a letdown. And if you look statistically, I think Edmonton outplayed the Kings in both games. This has been a very physical series, and I think Edmonton has had the shot advantage, the hit advantage, and the faceoff percentage advantage in both games so far in the series, if I remember correctly. They did in game 2, even though it was a loss. Actually, in game 1, Edmonton had 2 of the 3, but the hits were in favor of the LA Kings. Very physical performance from the Kings in that one. But other than that, Edmonton has been the better team in the series so far. LA put up a big performance in game 2, man, and they wound up winning in overtime. That's a dramatic win. So, I mean, playoffs, you don't really think that there's going to be like a letdown spot or anything like that in the playoffs. But if there was ever going to be one, it could be after that game for LA because that was such a huge, dramatic win for LA. And it would set up kind of a situation where Edmonton would be the team that could potentially bounce back here. And I think, like I said, Edmonton statistically outplayed LA in that game. And for some reasons, probably should have won that game. But it was a close game the whole way, and they didn't do it. So it's a situation where I will take the better team here. It does look like the market is in agreement with it. That's Edmonton. So that's going to be play 1. That's minus 128. I think it's the best number you can find. NBA playoffs. We have going today. We have a weird early 5:30 Eastern start for the Bucks and the Pacers. I believe all 3 of the games are on ESPN for a Friday NBA slate. So all of them get isolated matchups. So each game won't start until the prior game finishes. I believe will be the case at least. Although, of course, they're all at different venues. Bucks are at Indiana. This series shifts to Indiana. We've all the series that are shifting to a game 3 at a new venue tonight. Bucks, Pacers. Pacers are up from 4 to 6 at home, going through the 6 with juice. 72% of the tickets on them, 73% of the cash on the Pacers. Pacers continue to be the public team as they are the team that pushes the pace, scores more. And, of course, this line is indicating that the Bucks are still going to be without Giannis. He is doubtful. The line is indicating that he's not going to be playing in this one. Chris Middleton, I believe, will be playing, but he suffered like another injury, I think, during the last game and continued. I think he's just kind of been playing beat up, and he's going to continue to be playing beat up. Although I think the line is just too high, as it has been throughout the series. I think the line is just over adjusting to the Bucks being beat up. The Bucks do still have the advantages of having the better defense, as the Pacers really don't have a good defense at all, and the Bucks have more experience in the playoffs. So I think they have a couple of advantages that way. So I would only look to take the Bucks with a generous helping of points here, although I'm not going to actually do that in this one. And it is also a potential zigzag there, is maybe because the Pacers won game 2 and won it pretty handily after the Bucks. I was on the Bucks in game 1, thought they were being shortchanged there. They were an underdog in game 1. They came out and played a good game. The experience factored in. They slowed the game down, slowed the Pacers offense down, won the game easily. But then the Pacers zigzagged and won easily in game 2. As in game 2, I think the line actually shifted to the Bucks being a small favorite. But now, if the Bucks were like a 1-point favorite in game 2 at home, that would kind of indicate that the Pacers should probably be like somewhere around like a 4-point favorite here, which is kind of where it opened. But the line's moved way up on the Pacers, so I do think the line is over adjusting to everything that's going on here, to that game 2 result and to the Bucks being an injured team. So again, I think if you're going to play the side on this one, the only way to play it would be to take the Bucks here, and it would be a zigzag as well, because you're getting, I think, an extra point or 2 on the Bucks there, and the Bucks are the team that's going to have the adjustments to make there. And I think with Giannis, I believe they're the better team. Without him, do you shift the line this much? I'm not so sure about that. But the Pacers still may be like pumped up to be like finally hosting a playoff game after so long. So they probably will have a pretty raucous crowd there. So I'm not going to actually play that one, but I lean to the Bucks on the side there. The total in that one's down from 225 to 222. 55% of tickets on the under, but 71% of the cash on the over. I tend to not really get involved in game 3 totals. Kind of hard to gauge what's going on there. It looks like maybe the sentiment there from the money, from the guys that are putting bigger money on the total there, is that the total may have over-adjusted down a little bit too much. But, of course, if you're playing the over there, that means you kind of would be leaning to the Pacers side there, because I think if any game the total is going to be correlated with the side, it's going to be that game, where the Pacers are going to need the game to be higher scoring to be in their style of game and to cover a line like that as a favorite. Clippers Mavs is the second game up. That's a 1-1 series now, with the Clippers won game 1 in a blowout, and then the Mavericks won game 2, which was kind of an ugly game and a low-scoring game. It was actually a little bit, I think, misleading in the final score, because the Mavs did have the lead almost the whole game, played a better game than that final score would maybe indicate. Now it shifts back to Dallas. Dallas up from 3.5 to 4.5, going through the 4.5 with juice. Looks like they do have 80% of the tickets and cash on them right now. So it looks like they are public after that performance in game 2. But I don't know if you'd expect the Mavs to be that public. I mean, maybe, I guess, because everybody does like Luka. I mean, he's a very popular player, one of the best players in the NBA, of course. Whereas the Clippers have been, even though they have James Harden, Russell Westbrook, they've been kind of inconsistent. Kawhi Leonard came back for the Clippers in game 2, and I guess his defensive presence was kind of felt because the game was a lot lower scoring, but he was really horrific offensively. He's got to work his way back in, man. So he looked like he may not be totally ready yet. So I kind of wish I played the Mavs in that game once that news came out, because the line moved from the Mavs like a 2-point road favorite to about a pick 'em because of that news. And then it became a reverse injured player theory spot, where the Clippers having to work Kawhi Leonard, and it meant that Russell Westbrook didn't play as much. It was just kind of a mess of a game for the Clippers there. So does that continue here, or do we think it's going to be – so that's a 1-1 series now as well. Do we think it's going to zigzag, where maybe now the series is going to shift back the other way again, and the Clippers will have the adjustments to make? I don't know, man. I'm not entirely sure about that. The Clippers do, I believe, have more playoff experience with some of their personnel, so that's a little bit of an edge there. But I think the line is probably about correct in this game, as Mavs have been a favorite on the road in the series. So that would indicate actually that the line should maybe even actually be higher. But now with Kawhi Leonard back, I guess the line is about right, because it was a pick 'em in that game with Kawhi Leonard there. So you think that now, actually, yeah, the Mavs should probably be maybe even a little bit. Well, yeah, the Mavs should probably be about a 4 or 4.5 point favorite. That is about right. So the line seems about right in this one. This one's hard to gauge, man. Like, is game 2 just indicative that maybe the Clippers' inconsistency and woes are coming back, and maybe they won't zigzag in this one? I don't really know. I think the best way to play this one actually might be to play the over in this one, but I'm not going to do that either. But it's gone up from 210 to 211, going through the 211. 94% of the tickets on the over, however, and 80% of the cash. So it does look like public is more heavily on the over than the cash, potentially, but it does look like it's gone up a little bit. And I think the line maybe adjusted down a little bit too much after that really low scoring, very low scoring result in the previous game. You could see this game become a little bit higher scoring. And even though Kawhi Leonard, I believe, is going to be in there, and he obviously impacts the defense for the Clippers and makes their defense better. And his offense was pretty bad in that game, like I said, but he can't really get much worse than that. The game I'm actually going to be on, though, is going to be to go with this 0-2 series and take the zig-zag on the Phoenix Suns, who the books have continuously told you throughout the series that the Suns are actually the slightly better of these two teams. T-Wolves Suns shifts back. I was on the T-Wolves in game one because I thought that there was just too much of an overreaction from the public and in that line, like in the direction of the Suns. You got the T-Wolves in a nice small price as like a 1-point favorite. Now the series shifts to the other side. And I think this line is about right, given that that's where the line was at Minnesota. Books telling you Phoenix is the better team. Laying, it looks like it opened maybe around 3.5, but now it's 4. It's going through the 4. I think you can still find the 4s out there. Not a huge difference between 3.5 and 4. Suns are public still, though. 83% of the tickets on them, but 85% of the cash. So it does look like they have the cash coming in on them as well, driving the line up. So it looks like maybe pros and public are kind of both on the Phoenix Suns here. I actually like the Suns to make the adjustments here. And this is going to be the series returning back to Phoenix now after Phoenix lost both games and really did not look good in either of those games. I don't think either. Well, actually, I had Phoenix to zigzag in the second game and lost that one, taking Phoenix +3. That game, they played a little bit better than they played in the first game, but still not good enough. But now Phoenix returns home. The books are still telling you that Phoenix is actually the better team because they're getting a little bit more than home court advantage here. Public is coming in on them, as we know, because they do have Kevin Durant. They have Devin Booker. They have some of the big names in the sport of basketball, of course, in the NBA. Phoenix, I think they're going to make the adjustments here, man, and they're going to show up at home here now in a situation where they're down 0-2. They're going to come out and play. I think when the series opened, Phoenix was the favorite to win the series, which, of course, that is no longer the case after dropping the first 2 games. And maybe the line was a little bit over-adjusted on the series price because the Suns have actually dominated the T-Wolves over the last few years. As I mentioned, coming into the series, the Suns won all 3 games this year, but going back to 2021, the Suns have a really good record against the T-Wolves. I think it was something like 11-2 against them or something like that, or maybe even more than that, something in that ballpark. But from the matchups this season, like Towns was out, I think, in the second of the 2 games. And then in the final game, I think it might have been the game where Towns actually returned. So it was a reverse injured player theory. Or no, actually, I guess Towns already was. Or maybe they played in that game too. Maybe that was one of the other games that the Suns played the T-Wolves. I don't know. I don't know if they played the T-Wolves in Towns' return or not. But then the final game of the regular season, I don't think you can take that much away from that one either because the Suns had more motivation in that one than the T-Wolves did. Even though the T-Wolves were playing for the number 1 seed, the Suns were still trying to avoid the play-in, so a little bit more motivation on their side there. But all of that, I think we can just throw out now. We can just kind of look at this series, but I do think it is a little bit of a factor. The fact that the Suns have beaten the T-Wolves so many times recently, it does seem like they do have some matchup edges in that regard, even though they have lost both of these games in the series so far. But shifting back to Phoenix, being the 0-2, being the zig-zag spot, and the Suns not being overpriced here in the market, in my opinion. I don't really think they are, even though it looks like the number's up a little bit from where it opened. 4, I think, is okay. We'll lay the 4 with the Phoenix Suns in this one. And hopefully the pressure doesn't get to them in a huge situation like that. Getting a little bit desperate times for them. All right, and moving on to Major League Baseball. There are a few different sides that I kind of like in baseball that I'm not going to quite get involved in. I do lean to the Detroit Tigers in the afternoon game there between KC and Detroit. It looks like a pros versus Joes, where KC has 62% of the tickets, 66% of the cash, though, on Detroit. Somehow, man, Kansas City is second in this division. They're ahead of Detroit by a couple games, which I think that might motivate Detroit a little bit in this one, to be honest. It's weird seeing Kansas City getting the public action there, but Kansas City coming off a nice series. They swept the Blue Jays, so now I have to think they're in a bit of a letdown spot here. And Detroit didn't play yesterday, so Detroit has a little bit of an extra rest edge, but it's not as extreme as it could be otherwise because that Kansas City game, I don't know if it was cut short by rain or what it was, but it only wound up being a 5-inning game where they won against Toronto yesterday to complete the sweep. So I don't know what was up with that. So that means Kansas City did not use any relievers yesterday. So both of these teams do have a rested bullpen coming into this one. So the way you could even potentially look to an under in this one, but the line has moved down from 9.5 down to 8 already in this one. So all the value, I think, has kind of been sucked out of the under there. But I do like the Detroit side. It looks like the market is indicating that they've shifted up from, this says they were a plus 160 dog at some point. I don't think that was ever the case, but I saw them around minus 110 earlier. Now they're minus 114. So I do lean to the Detroit side. And Reese Olson against Seth Lugo. I mean, I think they're both decent pitchers. They both have decent numbers against these opponents, but Kansas City being in the letdown spot. And Olson actually has somewhat better numbers against Kansas City than Lugo does against Detroit, but Lugo has been the better of the two this season so far. But, I do like Olson. I think his ceiling is higher as a younger pitcher. And with him having the better numbers in this specific matchup as well, that is the way that I would lean in that one. To Detroit having a little bit more rest there. But Detroit is returning home from a road trip, although it was a 2-series road trip that didn't take them that far geographically. I also think Oakland is probably in a letdown spot, sticking in the AL real quickly here. But they're facing Corbin Burns, so Baltimore's going to be a huge favorite. Baltimore's returning from a road trip that I believe took them out to the West Coast. So even though they had yesterday off, they're not in the best spot, having to return from Anaheim to come into this game. So I don't really want to play Baltimore, especially at this big price. I do think that they have a huge advantage here in the fact that Oakland did play yesterday and beat the Yankees and split the series with the Yankees. So Oakland potentially in a letdown spot here and on less rest. But again, like I said, the return home spot for Baltimore tends to be a distracted spot. That's not a good spot for Baltimore to be in, but Burns is the better pitcher between him and Stripling. And I believe Oakland actually, I don't even think they've really seen Burns before because he spent almost his entire career up until now in the National League, and somehow Oakland, I think, just never drew him as an opponent. So that's going to be a little bit of an edge for Burns as well. But huge minus 275 favorite for Baltimore there. So not going to get involved in that one. Chicago, Boston, my Red Sox. Imanaga's pitching for Chicago. He's been really good for the Cubs so far. His first series his first season in the major league. So I do lean to the Cubs in this one. They're up from a plus 100 dog to a minus 106 favorite. 64% of the cash on them, 54% of the tickets. So they have the cash discrepancy on them. Of course, Red Sox have never seen Imanaga before, so that's another edge to Imanaga. Pitchers, when the hitters haven't seen them before, tend to have an edge. Hitters don't know how to face them. Imanaga, new to the league. He at least showed that he's human finally in the prior game that he had where he gave up 2 runs against Miami, and he had a bad Miami offense. He had not allowed any runs on the entire season up to that point. So he's been really good. Red Sox counter with Cutter Crawford, though. And Crawford actually has good stats this season, and in limited playing time, he's been good against the Cubs too. So you could look to potentially play this game under as well, as it's still sitting at around an 8. But it looks like the market, the cash discrepancy actually is on the over in that one. So that would give me a little bit of hesitation on that one too. A little bit of a strange so that's an interleague game. Excuse me. I think I accidentally said that was American League. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of lean to the under in that one, into the Cubs in that one, but it's not something I'm actually going to get involved in. Both teams played yesterday, by the way, and the Red Sox used more of their bullpen in yesterday's game than the Cubs used in theirs. Cubs coming off a pretty big series beating Houston, even though Houston has not been playing well this season. Still a pretty big deal when you beat the Houston Astros. So I don't know if it's going to be at all letdown spot for the Cubs there, but I do think the pitching situation, the bullpen rest advantage, and the starting pitching edge do go to the Cubs in that one, even though Crawford, I think, is not in like the worst spot and doesn't have the worst matchup there for the Boston side either. Then Washington, I think, is also in a bad spot. If you look at the NL real quick here, Trevor Williams, I think, is the worst pitcher out of between him and Luzardo, but Williams has been better this year. So I think it's actually a little bit misleading because Luzardo has really bad numbers this year, but he's actually the better pitcher. If you go and you just look at their career-wise, Luzardo is the better pitcher, has the better strikeout stuff, much higher ceiling for Luzardo. He's the type of guy I like to bet on. He looks like he's maybe finally turning it around as he had a better start in his most recent start. Maybe starting to get back to where he was the last couple of years. Miami's up from minus 150 to minus 158. When do you ever see the Marlins, who are so bad this year, as that significant a favorite. I don't know. Well, it's against Washington, who's also not a good team. And with Miami, the books are kind of telling you that Luzardo is actually the better pitcher here. Washington's actually public, 79% of the tickets on them and 81% of the cash on the side of Washington there. So Washington actually has a cash discrepancy, but I don't think there's much to like about Washington, to be honest. In this one, they're coming off a series against the Dodgers, though they did get swept. Yesterday's game was a tough 2-1 battle where they lost just by that one run. They used a decent amount of their relievers in that one. I think 4 relievers in that one. Coming off a tough series against the Dodgers, now having to go to Miami. Miami was off yesterday, so Miami has the rest, although Miami's returning from a road trip. But they also just got swept in the most recent series, and it was in Atlanta, so they're not traveling that far. It was only a 2-series road trip that took them to the Cubs and Atlanta, so not a long road trip, really. So I think that mitigates some of the return home distraction angles there. It's still not what I want to quite get involved in, but I think Miami having the rest edge, not having played yesterday, they have the more rested bullpen, even though their bullpen isn't that good, and I think they have the better pitcher in this one. And I think Luzardo's numbers are better against Washington than Williams's are on his career against Luzardo, too. So I lean to Miami in that one, and they are a somewhat heavy favorite, which is kind of crazy to see there. And then as far as the market indicators over in the Interleague, there are market indicators on Seattle as well. Arizona down from -135 to -123 is a road favorite. 60% of the tickets on them. Arizona remains public because we saw, of course, they went to the World Series last year. Seattle, 83% of the cash on them, though. And I think Seattle has the edge in the pitching matchup there, as I keep talking about. Emerson Hancock pitching for Seattle. I think he's starting to pitch a bit better, and he has a little bit of an edge because Arizona's hitters have never seen him before. So I do think the Seattle has the starting pitching edge there. Zach Gallen, he's got a good ERA on the season, 3, but his whip is a little bit higher than you'd like to see. 1.3, kind of indicative that his ERA should be a little bit higher than that. Seattle has seen him before, and he has only okay numbers, a 263 opponent batting average against Seattle, so they've been able to hit him a little bit. So I do think Seattle has a starting pitching edge. Seattle did not play yesterday, whereas Seattle played yesterday. So that's really the disadvantage that Seattle has here. Seattle played yesterday, and they won at Texas, which is a huge divisional win there, and they wound up winning the series 2-1. Now they're returning home from a series that took them to Colorado elevation and then to Texas, a huge divisional matchup. So that's the reason I don't want to play in Seattle here, even though I like the starting pitching matchup for them. Arizona has the rest edge, having not played yesterday. Arizona, I believe, is no, they're not starting a road trip. They're coming in from St. Louis in the middle of a road trip here. But still, I think Seattle being in a return home spot and being at a rest disadvantage, having played yesterday, and being in a letdown, coming off the game against Texas, can't quite get involved in that one. So even though I like the starting pitching edge, there are a lot of situational components to that go against Seattle on that one. So what's the game I'm going to be on? I've eliminated a bunch of possibilities. I'm going to be on the San Francisco Giants here. They're up from -140 to -142, although it looks like they're public. They have 66% of the tickets, only 55% of the cash. I don't really know why. It looks like they have ticked up a little bit on the money line. I think this is where we have the best rest edge, situational edge, and starting pitching edge, all in favor of San Francisco in this one. Pittsburgh played yesterday, although it was in the afternoon. They were playing at home against the Milwaukee Brewers. So they played yesterday. They had to use a bunch of their relievers. They used 4 of their relievers. They used a bunch of their better relievers in a game where they actually wound up blowing the game. They were winning 5-4 into the 8th inning. So a big game against the team that's leading the division, the Milwaukee Brewers. Huge game, huge series for Pittsburgh. They had the game in hand, and they blew it in dramatic fashion, giving up runs in the 8th and 9th innings to lose the game. That's kind of a devastating loss, man. And now, even though, they are starting a road trip, which does kind of help you refocus, coming off a tough series against the Brewers like that, where they won the first 2 games. Every game in the series was close, and they lost in the final innings in yesterday's afternoon game and used up some of their better relievers in that one. That sets this up to be not a good spot for Pittsburgh, man. They're in a rest disadvantage because Giants didn't play yesterday. Pittsburgh had to use some of their better relievers in a hard-fought game in a big division rivalry game, man. Coming off that, I think it's a hangover spot for Pittsburgh. Puts their bullpen in a rest disadvantage. San Francisco had yesterday off, and they're not even traveling. They lost their most recent game badly to the Mets, so I think that puts them in a bounce-back spot. They had the day off yesterday after an ugly 8-2 loss there. And they're staying at home, so they don't have to travel either. So even though maybe that means they're having to hear about how bad they are because they lost that game to the Mets. But I like this for San Francisco a lot better, man. And Pittsburgh, they have to travel out to the West Coast now for a late game. They're coming from Pittsburgh, which is East Coast time zone to West, and having to play a 10:15 start time. That tends to be one of the worst things for your biological clock, man, when you're biologically adjusted to the East Coast time, to the Eastern time zone, and then you have no days off and you have to go out to the West Coast and play a 10:15 game. It's like playing a game at like 1 a.m. your time, man. So that's really not a good spot for Pittsburgh. So I think that's a disadvantage for them as well, a travel disadvantage. So a lot of edges for San Francisco here. And in the starting pitching matchup, Kyle Harrison for Pittsburgh. He's a guy I've talked about. He has good stuff, man, but he has bad numbers on the season so far. 5 ERA, 1.33 whip. Certainly not the best. But I think he's starting to acclimate to the majors, starting to do a little bit better. And Pittsburgh has never seen him before. So he has a little bit of an edge there. He's a really young pitcher, 22 years old. He does throw lefty as well. So sometimes that lefty arm angle tends to be a little bit difficult for teams to come in and have to adjust to as well. So I think he has a bit of an edge there because Pittsburgh hasn't seen him before. In the month of April, he's been pretty good with a 19.5 strikeout walk ratio. Actually, on the season, he's been good, a 24-5 strikeout walk ratio. If you include that first start at San Diego, Petco, although that's a pitcher-friendly park. He's given up too many home runs, 5 home runs, 31 hits in 27 innings. Other than that, his stats are quite good, man. That strikeout walk ratio indicates that he's dealing, man. Even though his last start was his worst against Arizona, he only went 4 innings in that one, gave up 3 runs. He hasn't allowed more than 4 earned runs in any game. He's allowed 3 in 3 out of the 5, 2 in the first one, and then 4 in the other one. So he's been pretty consistent at not getting really drilled and allowing a ton of runs in any start. So that's pretty good. His strikeout walk ratio would indicate that he's actually pitching better than his other stats indicate. So from last year, in 7 starts, he had a 1.15 whip and a 35-11 strikeout walk ratio and 34 2/3. So pretty good strikeout numbers, good strikeout walk numbers last year. So I like all that about it. And then Quinn Priester is pitching for Pittsburgh. He has bad numbers this year, man. An 8.31 ERA on the season, 1.85 whip, only in 1 start. So I don't know what you can take away from that against the Red Sox at home. But he gave up 3 home runs in the game at 4 1/3, 7 hits, 4 earned runs, 5 runs, 2 strikeouts, and 1 walk. None of those numbers look good, man. His career so far, he's made 9 starts now in his career for 7.79 ERA, 1.71 whip. So he's a very young guy as well, but he just hasn't really been getting it done yet, man. 38 strikeouts and 54 1/3, bad strikeout rate, 28 walks, bad strikeout walk numbers for him as well. Nothing to really like about Priester here, man, in this with these numbers. His career numbers don't indicate that he's that good of a pitcher so far. So I like what I've seen out of Harrison. His strikeout walk numbers much better, indicating that he has had the much better command out of the 2 pitchers. So that's what I'm going with, man. So that's slate one more time. So I think Pittsburgh has San Francisco has the advantage for all those reasons I just listed. So one more time, those plays today, 1 in each sport. San Francisco Giants, I'll actually make this a run line play. You can get the alternate run line at DraftKings -1 at -105 instead of laying the -140 or whatever, which I think is a little bit better. Even though it'll push if they win by 1, you're losing less money if they lose the game. So making it a little bit more conservative there, I guess, in some ways. San Francisco -1, run line -105. Phoenix Suns -4, and Edmonton Oilers -128. Let's get it done. Peace.